Welcome to 5 and 5 from the One Stop Co-op Shop, where I discuss 5 key elements of a game in about 5 minutes. I'm Michael Kelly, and today I'm looking at Kingdom Rush Rift in Time from Lucky Duck Games. Disclaimer that I was sent a review copy of the core game. I'm a fan of the Kingdom Rush app game series, and I also like tower defense, but I found board game tower defense games to usually be a little too fiddly. Does this one fall into the same trap? Let's find out and get to the list. And we'll answer that fiddly question right off the bat with my number 5, which is a con, and that is that the game is somewhat fiddly. Now clearly it isn't too bad because this is my lowest point in the review, but putting the little polyomino pieces on the enemies can feel a little fiddly, and then when you defeat them, having to knock them all off, and there's so many different types and so many different shapes, even if you have them organized in a token holder like I do, it can still take a little while, and then just finding the right enemies to set up the scenarios takes a while, finding the right towers as you upgrade them. There's just a lot of moving parts. Even with just the base game, I imagine it would be worse with the expansion. It does not ruin things by any stretch of the imagination, but it's something to be aware of because it can kind of slow down your play. But I'm going to switch to a pro for my number 4, and that's focused on the heroes in the game. So even though this is a tower defense game, each player will have their own hero, and in solo you get to bring in kind of helper heroes a few times each game. And the heroes add a fun extra layer to the gameplay because they have their own health, and you want to use them to attack effectively but not put them in too much danger. In later scenarios they even get directly attacked by the hordes you're fighting. And they each have their own unique basic attack, they can get to these skills, that give them extra powers, so lots of fun stuff. It's not too high for me because the towers really are the main show here, and honestly the heroes can seem a little bit samey as you play with them more. They aren't as different as they could be, even with the skills, but they're still fun to use and fight with. For my number 3, I'm looking at the scenarios and their victory conditions. There's 10 in the core game and kind of a loosely connected narrative campaign, and for me this is a mix leaning pro. On the positive side, I think the scenarios are nicely different. They have sort of a progression thing, just like the app, where they add in new enemy types, they add in new powers, so you always have something kind of cool to explore as you progress through. And there's also nice variety in the objectives for some of the scenarios. Now, most of them just have you defeating these portal enemies, which are super interesting because they really challenge you since you can't use your heroes to fight them. But then others have you protecting people or fighting these cool bosses. That's all really nice. Now, the negative side is, first of all, those portal enemies I mentioned, which are the main objective for most scenarios, might be frustrating for some players because they destroy your towers as you hit them. So while it's a great puzzle, it's not necessarily fun for that feeling of building up. And the other negative is that while there's a little bit of variety in which enemies show up, which types, basically things play out the same way. The spawn stacks are always the same. So if you play the same scenario more than once, it won't really seem that exciting and new to you. I will note they have these higher difficulty settings that can be incredibly challenging, but once you beat those for all 10 scenarios, I think you'd have to look into the expansions to really feel like you're getting more value out of the game. But we haven't really gotten to the tower defense, the heart of this game, and let's do that for our final 2 points. Number 2 is a pro, and that's how you upgrade your towers. So they have 4 different types of towers, which each shoot different shapes of polyominoes and have different ranges and different abilities. That's already really cool, but a great mechanic here is how you upgrade them. And this is so cool for the puzzle of solo, and also for the cooperation of 2 to 4 player co-op. Because in co-op, to upgrade your towers, you have to not use them for the turn, and you pass them to a different player, and that player gets the upgraded one. So it's a fun little addition to the communication and the puzzle of co-op, in that I have to figure out which colors of our towers need to be with which people, and I don't want to leave myself with no towers and give you all of them, so it really forces players to chat and strategize a great deal if they want to win. But even in solo, to upgrade your towers, you have to not use them, and that's a great give and take, because you want to hit the enemies to survive, but not hit them so hard that you're not getting stronger, because they keep on increasing in power. So it's just a really nice way to handle tower upgrading in general, instead of dealing with money or experience or something like that. And finally, my number 1, a huge pro, is the core tower placement and polyomino fighting in the game. You're putting down these towers on limited colored spaces. In co-op, you can only go on your own color. In solo, you have to take out one color each round, so you have to kind of figure out what you can do without. And you put your towers down, and then they give you these pieces to put on the enemies, and you have to arrange it in just the right way to cover as many as you can. Plan out turns ahead if you can to perfectly decimate a unit. It can be a really, really thinky, really challenging puzzle, especially at higher difficulty settings. But at lower difficulty settings, I can play with my son, my 8-year-old, and he just has fun putting the pieces on people and smashing them to bits. Just a great little puzzle element, and a new way of doing polyominoes I've never seen before that I really, really enjoy. Overall, people looking for a great tower defense board game can basically stop because this is by far the best one I've played. I also think gamers who love a tough tactical puzzle should check this out because whether it's solo or co-op, when you crank up that difficulty setting, it's going to melt your brain trying to figure out the exact right way to place your towers and which ones to hold off on. It's just great. But at the same time, if you're willing to push that difficulty level down, I think this is a great one for families too, so it can really stretch that gamut of gamers. On the other hand, you might want to consider avoiding this one if you hate a little bit of fiddliness and dealing with a lot of tokens and longer setup time because this game has all of that. Also, if you want tons of variety, I think the base game will eventually kind of run out of that. Probably after 20 or 30 plays, you'll have seen all there is to see. And finally, you might want to avoid this one if your group has really bad alpha gamer tendencies, because while you are holding your own towers, one person can definitely dominate and tell everyone where to play things, so just be careful of that. If you'd like to see a full playthrough of the game in action, just click the video link that just popped up. Good gaming, and I'll see you at the next stop.